Meet Caleb Ralston.
I was the classic kid. I stole my mom's camera. And my little sister Victory and I were making little skits in our backyard.
Creative strategist, videographer, and creative team builder who spent over 16 years behind the camera, helping some of the biggest names in business scale their online brands.
Two characters by the name of Alex and Leila Hormozi reached out and we started talking, and I started working with them and we built out their media team.
From his work with Gary Vee to helping the Hormozi scale acquisition.com, Caleb's now taken his talent solo and started his own boutique consultancy.
I decided to go out on my own and build out my own consulting firm.
But the goal is simple: build elite media teams and original content that stands out.
So it's been 16 years of making other people's content, and now we are just cracking the surface of making my own.
Join us in today's episode as we explore why Caleb believes burnout is real.
I think burnout is 100% real. But in New York City, when I was working with Gary, I got burnt out.
And how to build high output without breaking down.
As work evolves, I think the way you need to approach it evolves.
His exact framework for building high-performing content teams that don't rely on the founder.
I don't think that you should hire for any reason other than to solve a problem. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're bringing on a liability that you will eventually end up firing.
The storytelling first strategy he uses to turn content into behavioral change and then revenue.
I think that if you share these stories where the audience can see themselves in the story, then they no longer have an excuse.
Whether you're growing your personal brand, building a media team, or just want to avoid creative burnout, then this episode is a must-watch.
To build the best personal brand, I think you need to know yourself the most, because you're not putting on a front, you're actually being just genuinely you.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying the videos, why not consider subscribing? We drop bi-weekly content that will help you improve your business right here on the channel. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you.
Jordan, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, man.
Cool. I want to kick off by just talking about you. So I know you've spent, I think, over half your life creating content. There's a lot of backstory there. I think I've seen a few videos of you in the kind of gym in the powerlifting or bodybuilding days. Can you just walk us through kind of that journey and why you picked up a camera in the first place?
Yeah. What a cool way to put it, dude. I've never thought about it from the fact that it is over half my life. That is actually fucking wild. That's really cool. I started doing video. I was the classic kid that you hear the stories about that like had a fucking, I stole my mom's camera when I was like 7 years old. And my little sister Victory and I were making little skits in our backyard, and making those and showing them to family members and stuff. And then I remember this thing called YouTube came around, and me and my buddies in junior high, actually, maybe high school, but I think it was junior high. We were making these like, almost like we would take our favorite songs and we would try to make music videos to them. And God, they were epic. And we would upload those to YouTube. And I've been honestly searching high and low to try and find that username. One day I'm going to find it. That will be incredible. There's videos of me in high school, but like the really early ones, I can't seem to find. But anyways, was really into that. Started volunteering actually at my church on the media team there. And I got very lucky. I think luck is the right word. Serendipity was in my favor here. Sean Cannell was the director of video at the church, my local church in Marysville, Washington. So like small little town. If you're not familiar with Sean Cannell, you should be. He's an absolute savage gangster when it comes to YouTube and is really big over there. I learned from him and I started interning with him, and he was building out his production company. And so I just carried his lights and tried to learn from him as much as possible. And he put me on to this crazy, wacky character that came onto the scene around, I want to say 2009, 2010, named Gary Vaynerchuk. He gave me the book, Crush It. And now this is a wild thing for a leader in a church to give a kid in the church, like Gary's book, right? Because he says fuck more than like anything you could ever imagine. But yeah, I read that book and I remember, Jordan, thinking like, holy shit, this is insane. I could do video for a living. Because I was the student that didn't ever do his schoolwork. I sucked in school. I was just talking to Trevor about this the other day, actually. Trevor's on my team. In first grade, I remember my teacher flipped over the desk halfway through the year because she was very pissed. And all of the assignments that I had not done fell out. And so I was a terrible student. So when I read Gary's book and he talked about being a terrible student and how there was this new wave coming where people were going to talk about what they're passionate around on the internet and make money, I was like, fucking sold. Like, sign me up. I'm just going to, coast through high school and work my way through it. And so that's what I did. And I started in the bodybuilding and powerlifting industry, like you called out. And I was working with all the top supplement companies out there: Universal Nutrition, BSN, MHP, Ronnie Coleman Signature Series, like all these different brands, working with a lot of the different bodybuilders that I really looked up to and admired. And that's when I started to realize, like, oh, I got something here. I started getting paid for work. That was amazing. But then quickly realized, like most young characters who do freelancing do, it's inconsistent. So I needed a consistent day job. Started working at a Logos Bible software at a software company. And that was awesome. Worked in-house there, helped them create the commercial work and everything that we put out. We did original content, documentaries. And I learned a lot of what I would call traditional production work there. That's where I got kind of like the understanding of what lenses to choose, how to frame, right? Like editing theory. I learned a lot of that there. And then from then I went on, worked and did some more freelancing with our I-502 cannabis companies out of Washington State. And then a crazy opportunity came up, and I got the ability to work for Gary Vaynerchuk for one of his companies called PureWow. Moved out from Bellingham, Washington to New York City. Did that for about 9 months, got pulled onto Team Gary. That was the dream. And traveled with Gary for about 2.5 years as his videographer. Was able to work with him and D-Rock on editing Trash Talk, did the Blueberry clip, lots of really cool moments. From then went on to work for a company that he actually sold his wine brand to. So Empathy Wines he built up, and he sold that to Constellation Brands. They are a Fortune 500. They own like Svedka, Modelo, Corona, like all these big brands, right? Went over there to help build out the direct-to-consumer division within this massive organization. So it was almost like a startup team within a massive entity. Wild environment. And then from there, I decided to move to Las Vegas to ride my Harley Davidson more often. And about a month after that, two characters by the name of Alex and Leila Hormozi reached out, and we started talking, and I started working with them, and we built out their media team and scaled those brands. And as of November, so it's almost been like 6 months now, man. 6 months ago, basically, I decided to go out on my own and build out my own consulting firm and take on a few clients, very limited amount, not high volume, more boutique, and work with them and start this journey of putting out content for myself. So it's been 16 years of making other people's content, and now we are just cracking the surface of making my own.
What a journey. I do want to come back and talk about what you're doing now later on. But the first thing I want to kind of touch on is, obviously you've worked with, recently some pretty insane people in terms of, Gary Vee and an acquisition. What would you put kind of the success in getting those roles down to? Like, how did you end up in those places?
Well, I think early on in your career, I think you have to be willing to say yes more than you are willing to say no. And I think right now we have this hyper saying no, I guess, conversation that's taking place online and in culture. And I think it's super important, but it's missing a massive part, the first chunk of your career, when like nobody cares if you say no, like saying yes is more of a win for you than anybody else. And so I think in the early days, you have to say yes to a lot of things. And so I got into the positions I have been in because I said yes to a lot of things leading up to it. So the Pure Wow job, I've noted online, I was pretty aggressive in how I approached getting that role, right? But I wasn't obnoxiously aggressive. I think I added value each time I followed up. So I emailed David D-Rock many different times, okay? But every time that I emailed him, I made sure to include a new video that wasn't like a video in my portfolio. It was like a mini vlog, you could almost think of it. Just sharing more of who I was to hopefully make his decision easier, right? Whether or not I was the right kind of character for the team. But after that, and really, honestly, since then, I've not strived for a role. They've all then, after that, been inbound to me. And I think that that's because of me still saying yes when a lot of people started saying no. So when I was at PureWow, I said yes to everything. Every project that was outside of my scope, I said yes to because I viewed it as an opportunity to show my chops, show my reliability, And I felt like if I crush it with what I've been given, maybe by some miracle, word will bubble up to the big man, the G man, Gary, and maybe he'll find out and be stoked about it. And the best case scenario ended up happening. He heard about it and he ended up pulling me onto the team, right? But I think a lot of it, when I moved to Vegas, I didn't seek out that opportunity. They were put in contact with me through a mutual friend. And I think, that the reason why I moved to Vegas, I said, was to ride my Harley more, but I was also pursuing a side project where I was making more Harley centric video content on Instagram for fun. And I just felt in my gut like Vegas was the next step for me. And so I just literally had that decision and within like a month was living in Vegas. And
Wow.
so I think it's being able to make a calculated call, not just saying yes to every stupid thing, but like being willing to say yes to things that maybe don't make sense on paper in the moment, but knowing that the effort that you're applying to it will yield some result. Maybe you don't know, especially early on, you don't know what results you're going to get. And that shouldn't be the goal. The goal should be the work that you do, knowing that the work you're doing is going to open up the opportunities later.
Okay. So would you say, hard work leads to more luck?
No, because I think there's a fuckload of people that work really hard that never get anything. So I think that's a major misnomer that hard work, it's, and this is the unfortunate reality, is it's hard work done intentionally and done smartly, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think I could work my face off on, Substack writing right now, and I could go ham on that. But I know that is not where my skill is right now. And so, like, is that in the cards to maybe attack in the next, 24 months? Yeah, definitely. But right now, hell no. We're just trying to get YouTube and Instagram dialed and then bring LinkedIn into the picture, right? So I think it's working hard on the right things. And the
Okay.
hard part is you don't really know what the right things are, which is why I like doing a lot of shit early on, because it gives you many at bats so you can fail and not get the outcomes you want from many different things because you did enough that maybe one does win. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I think that's really good advice for people that are early in their career, right? Is yes, work hard, that's part of the equation. But then you're kind of saying, try a bunch of different stuff, double down on what works and where your skill set seems to be.
Yeah, I just know so many videographers who are still, and there's nothing wrong with this, except for some of them don't want to be. They're still in Bellingham, Washington, doing the same gigs with the same kind of clients. They're working really hard, but they're not working really hard on the right things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to say one or ask one final question on this hard work point. I know we kind of talked about this offline as well. What switched for you? Because I know you've worked insanely hard for like the past decade at least, right? What switched from going from that kind of, dare I say it, poor student who probably didn't work very hard to this where you're, working insanely hard for long periods of time?
I fucking hated school. That's why I didn't work hard in it. I hated it more than anything. And I don't like doing things that I'm not very good at. Here's a really good example here. Pickleball. Everyone's really into pickleball. My friend Michael's really into it. My girlfriend Kat's really into it. Like, I got a lot of people that are like really into pickleball. I don't fucking like it that much because I'm not very good at it. And the way my brain works is it's like, well, yeah, of course, you're not going to be good at anything when you first start. So you could spend time working on that. Or you could spend that same time riding your Harley, getting faster, getting better, doing better on curves, corners, all that shit. And it's like, I'm going to get way more return out of that time. So I tend to be that way. So with school, it was like, I got no reinforcement because like, even when I did write a fucking paper, I wasn't getting A's, right? Like the only times now, the only class that I did do really good in was history. History I did really good in because I found it really interesting. But there was years where I did not do very well because I didn't find it interesting. So for me, I think I am actually chronically lazy, unbelievably lazy. I really am. Uh, I just think that when I'm really obsessed and passionate around something, I'm the complete opposite of lazy. So when it comes to brand content, all of this, I am not lazy at all. When it comes to my Harley, I am not lazy. When it comes to cleaning up our house, I'm pretty fucking lazy.
Makes sense. Were you ever, or have you ever been burnt out through work?
Oh yeah, dude. I personally believe that let's go there. I believe people that say that burnout isn't real are employers. They have employees, and so they are incentivized to say such things. Burnout is so fucking real. Like, all you got to do is talk to an athlete. Like, like I came up in powerlifting, right? And overtraining is a very real thing. Okay, uh, there's people online that say overtraining isn't a thing. I was fucking filming with the biggest bodybuilders and powerlifters in the world. Overtraining is a fucking thing. Like, at the highest level, they're worried about it and taking care and being cognizant of it. And yeah, I think burnout is 100% real. I've had times where, I mean, I think a lot of people look at seasons where they've burnt out with a disdain to it. I don't. So I want to be very clear. The story I'm about to share, I look at with so much positivity, and I would not be where I am without it. But in New York City, when I was working with Gary, I got burnt out. 100 fucking percent, dude. Like, I moved from rural, small town Washington to New York City, lived out in Brooklyn, commuted an hour on the subway into the city every morning, and commuted an hour home every night. I saw more people on my commute into work than I would see in 3 months where I grew up. So, like, one, just sensory overload there was like fucking absurd. Then, filming with, I would, I'd be willing to go to bat against anyone. The busiest man on fucking earth. Like, that dude, his calendar rivals anybody. I guarantee. And so that was like, you're always on, right? Because you're not only filming, you're managing the calendar. You're looking at, like, hey, gee, like, this meeting was 5 minutes. We got 1 minute left, and you got the next 5 minute meeting. And then after that, there's a 2 minute meeting. I'm talking like very granular on the calendar. So yeah, dude, I definitely got to a point. I mean, I have clips when I was editing Trash Talk. Um, I would get the footage on Sunday, and I would basically work Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 12 to 14-hour days. And then Thursday, I would come in around somewhere between 6:30 and 8 a.m. And I wouldn't leave until Friday at 2 p.m. after the video had shipped. Literally just work straight through. And I did that for all 4 of the Trash Talk episodes that I edited. And I have clips of me, like, I don't care. I don't have an ego around it. I was sitting in the fucking bathroom stall crying in the middle of the night, being like, I'm losing my mind. Was this ever because of the pressure that he put on me? No, it was my self-induced pressure, right? Like, I was like, I'm going to murder this episode. People know I'm editing it, so I want my name on this, and I want it to be the best possible. So I put a lot of pressure on myself. So historically, what I have found is when I burn out, it's not due to my employers, it's me. I put a lot of pressure on myself. And so now I'm in this weird season where I am my employer, right? And so if I burn out, it's just because I am not doing a good job of managing myself, right? I'm not, if I'm an athlete, I'm not doing a good job of stretching, of icing afterwards. I'm not recovering, right? Because, and the other thing too is, as work evolves, I think the way you need to approach it evolves. When I was an editor, I could fucking go 14 hours straight. No, dude, I'd be sitting in an edit and 14 hours would go by like that. I wouldn't even know it flew by, right? But now, if I'm like meeting with a client and we're developing their brand strategy for the next 18 months, and there's all these nuanced variables, I can't do that for 14 hours straight. I got to do that and then go for a walk. And so, like, my work has to change. And it's actually harder for me to do that versus the opposite. I'm actually finding that the discipline comes in more, or is more necessary for me to be like, take a second, go for a walk. That's where all your real inspiration comes, etc.
Very interesting. What would you say to people that would say, burnout is part of the process, and that kind of experience you had was the price you have to pay?
I think it depends on what you want. I think for most people, they should never burn out. I think if you are very, very ambitious, just like, again, if I'm going to use the athlete example, like in powerlifting, if you are truly ambitious and you want to set a world record, so you want to be in the top, 0.01% of powerlifting athletes, you are probably going to injure yourself. You are probably going to overtrain. You are probably going to fatigue. You are probably going to burn out because you're pushing yourself. If you have those big ambitions, it's impossible, in my opinion, to not reach those levels. Now, do I believe that it's good and admirable to go around and tout how great that stuff is? No, I don't think so. Like, I'm not like aiming to burn out. That's not my goal. I do not want that in any way, shape, or form. But what I am trying to do is get as close to touching the sun without getting burnt as possible. And sometimes you do realize, like, shit, I should have used, SPF 80 instead of 30, to use that analogy. Especially when you're pasty white like me. I mean, it burns like crazy.
No, it's a good analogy. Another kind of devil's advocate point is, what would you say to people that said you don't get burnt out if you're following your passion?
I would just ask them, how long have they been following theirs? I think, yeah, I think these are all statements that sound really good and they're very convincing, right? And they make a great tweet, they make a great hook for your Instagram reel, but I just don't think that they actually practically stand up and hold up in real humans' lives. Like, sure, maybe those like few characters who their whole life is optimized around this one entire thing. Okay, cool. Yeah. But for the majority of us humans, we're pushing really hard with our careers, our businesses, but we also have families. We have our health we're looking up, and things ebb and flow. Family emergencies pop up. Like, things happen all the time. So I just think, I don't know. I think those are too black and white and they don't take into account any sort of nuance.
I agree with you. I do think a lot of those kind of comments are trotted out quite a lot, though. And I think it's quite damaging for people in the space.
Yeah, I think it sets, I mean, if you want to get really real, I think the people that are saying that it's not real, they set a very dangerous expectation for people, especially the young, hungry women and men that are entering into this world for the first time in their life. They're coming out of, uni or whatever. And like, Jesus, dude, like the moment that they start feeling those feelings, but they're being told that it's not real, that is I think the term is cognitive dissonance. Like, that is some fucked up shit. And so I think, you know, it's more advantageous for everybody to start being more real about this shit.
For sure. On that note, how do you personally go about kind of recovery and relaxation? What do you do?
I I load up my Harley Davidson and leave my house at 3 a.m. to ride 1,000 miles in 14 hours. That's what I did last week. Literally last Tuesday, I we've been pushing it on filming. We had this crazy 6 hour plus course that we released for free on YouTube. Then we filmed right after that a video that will drop in June on how to build and run a high performing media team. That'll probably be about 2 hours. That'll drop in June. The video that we're going to drop this Friday is actually only 11 minutes or 12 minutes probably, but we spent 4 different days on production because it's a completely different style of video than we've ever done. So I was exhausted from these fucking film sessions. And so I was talking to Trevor and he was like, dude, you should like take a day or something. And I decided to hop on my Harley and do that, which is exhausting. And, I'm sore as fuck. Even a week later, I'm still sore. But that's what I like to do. That, or I'll go for a walk with my girlfriend and my dog. Or the other thing, and it's not popular amongst people kind of in my world, but I love getting lazy on the couch and watching Netflix for like a whole fucking day. Like, I love a Sunday where it's just like, we're doing nothing but just binging shit and ordering some Uber Eats. I love that shit.
Nice. Okay. It's interesting you said about the Harley. So I've heard this before, like physical exertion is a great relaxation for someone that works in like a mentally taxing field.
That makes sense.
Right,
I will say it's also a mental, like, you can imagine if you're going, the speed limit the whole time, of course, you're doing that, you're locked in mentally for 14 hours straight. Like, there's no other form of meditation that I have found that gets me singular focus than writing.
Okay. So you're not thinking of edits and project ideas and
Hell
strategy?
no. Hell no. No, because then that semi might kill me.
Okay. Also on that, do you do those rides solo, and do you have like an end destination in mind, or do you just kind of go off and see where the road takes you?
Dude, I love these questions. Yes, I do them solo and I do them with friends. So it kind of depends, but I have always kind of been a. Are you familiar with Kid Cudi?
Yeah, I used to watch his TV show.
Love that, dude.
I
Yeah,
forgot what the name is.
solo
Remember
dolo.
Kings?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, dude. That's awesome. Yeah, I resonate with the solo dolo anthem. I love going with homies on rides. I used to love going on backpacking trips with homies, but my favorite is honestly going solo. I think it puts you in a little bit more of a sketchy situation, which causes different thoughts to occur, and yeah, I think I mean, dude, not to just go really fucking deep really fast all of a sudden, but when I was younger, I had a tough time with myself, is how I will put it. And I started doing these solo overnight backpacking trips. And that's when I first started getting good with myself and like getting to know. I grew up super conservative, super Christian, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there was some issues that I had with it. And I all of a sudden came to a point where I started, I guess, getting to know the real Caleb, not the Caleb that was formed purely by what he was told to believe growing up. And so that's where I think I really got into these solo trips.
Okay. So you almost had to discover your own story before you could kind of tell other people's.
I think so. And personally, Jordan, I think that is something that we are doing until the day we die. I
Hmm.
think, part of building your personal brand is that process of self discovery. I think Chris Do talks about this like at an exceptional level, where it's like you are ultimately to build the best personal brand. I think you need to know yourself the most because if you do that and you're comfortable with it, you'll be willing to put that version of you out there, which you're more likely to stick with because you're not putting on a front. You're actually being just genuinely you.
Yes, and I want to kind of come back to this later on because you said some really great advice for everyone, which is kind of lean into who you are for your personal brand. But I want to kind of finish off your story before we kind of talk more about that. Next question is on locations. So obviously you kind of talked about where you grew up. You then moved to kind of New York. Vegas, I think is certainly where you were for a bit. I don't know if you're still there. Can you just talk about the kind of different places you've lived and kind of what you like about them and where you see yourself in the future?
Yeah. I grew up in Arlington, Washington. Um, that is a town where if you walk onto the campus of the local high school, you'll be greeted by at least 5 different farmers that spit out chewing tobacco within 30 seconds. I grew up in a very small town and I didn't like it as a kid. I always wanted to be a city kid. And so I actually, at a very young age, was like, I do eventually want to try my hand at living in New York City. Literally, before I ever heard about Gary or anything like that, I was like, I think 6 months in New York City is what everybody should do at some point in their life. And so I, kind of had that as a background goal. Then I, moved out of my parents' house, moved up to Bellingham, Washington. If you have not been to Bellingham, Washington, especially if you're out of the US, I think Bellingham is one of the best kept secrets of the US.
Why?
It is, oh, dude, it's fucking phenomenal. Now, as is the majority of the PNW, 9 months out of the year, it's kind of atrocious. All of the PNW people that heard that got very mad, but let's be real. It's true. It's cloudy and rainy all the time. It's fucking brutal. But during like July, August, September, Bellingham, Washington is the greatest place on earth. It's like the perfect temperatures, upper 80s, low 90s. It's right on the bay. So like you got the water there, but you also have the mountains. So you're like in between the ocean and the mountains. There's a million different breweries. I love beer. There's a million different coffee shops. I love coffee. Lots of good food, cool culture, and still has a little bit of that like small town vibe. So Bellingham was great. And then I moved to Brooklyn. I lived in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. Loved it out there. I lived right off of Broadway, literally parallel with the subway, with the J train. Which, when we were looking at the apartment, was like super cool and attractive. 1 month into living there, it was like, God damn, this thing runs all night long and it's loud as fuck. So that was interesting. But That was really cool. I loved New York, but I also was broke. And so it was very, very fucking hard. I don't think I would ever want to go back to New York until there's like more money there to be able to live a different lifestyle. I think a lot of people should do it. And like, I'm grateful I did when I was younger, but that shit was hard. Then I actually moved between New York and Vegas. I actually lived in Portland, Oregon. I went out west when COVID hit. You know, we didn't know what the fuck was going on. I was like, I'm going to drive across America and go visit friends and family, and I'll just work remotely. I'll just be there for a month. And it just like kept extending. I ended up staying in Portland for about a year and a half or so. And then I moved to Vegas because in Portland is when I started. That's when I learned how to ride a motorcycle. I learned in 2020. So I've not been riding that long. I went 0 to 100 really fast and very quickly realized like the rain and everything. You know, I like riding in the rain because I like, you know, gnarly conditions, but it's not enjoyable. You can't go fast and it's not safe, blah, blah, blah. So that's why I moved to Vegas. And I really liked Vegas, actually. Like, Vegas is really cool. The downsides are 4 months out of the year, it's like unbearably hot. Now, I still ride year round. Like, I rode, you know, 2 years ago when it hit like 121 degrees. But it's brutal and not super enjoyable. It's more just enjoying the stubbornness of being like, I ride year round. And so we've recently been looking at potentially relocating somewhere. There's a lot of different cities that are interesting to me, but one that is very interesting, I have no idea if we'll actually settle there, but Nashville, Tennessee is a very interesting one for us.
Okay, interesting. What do you look for? But before we move on, what are the kind of like top 3 to 5 things that you like in a good place to live?
Well, now that I have my own business, I do look for a state with no state income tax. That's a good one. Someone that's a little bit more favorable there. But I think the big one for us is it walkable? We love going on walks. Like, that's a big thing with our puppy. For me, it's like, is it rideable? Like, are there good rides around? That is a huge priority for me. Like, every year that goes by that I'm riding more and more, I'm just realizing that brings me so much joy. It's a really high priority in my life. And then I think, thirdly, it's, do we think that there's potential for good community for us? Right? Do we feel like we're going to find people that are our vibe? And we have kind of different vibes than your average bear. So, like, you know, it's not, you know, cut out for every single town. And so that's kind of how we do that. And we'll go out and visit for a few times to see if it fits.
Okay. I want to talk about kind of work stuff now. And I want to start with your kind of background. And can you explain this to someone like myself who's not the most versed in kind of all the roles in the video and production and content world? What roles did you kind of have and what jobs did you do as you kind of learn?
Uh, I have been a grip, and a grip is essentially, I'll put it very plainly, you are the muscle on set, as in you just carry everything. So you move light stands, you hold C stands, you put up the lights, you put up the muslins, you hold the tripods, you maybe hold lenses for the DP, all that shit. I have been an assistant camera operator. And so sometimes what that means is like setting up the camera and everything like that. And then the DP comes in and they do their magic. Sometimes on a shoot, depending if it's like a limited budget, that means you're actually a camera operator. And so you're operating B cam on like an interview or something like that. I did that. I was an assistant editor where I basically did all the ingesting of the footage, tagging, and I would assemble the timeline for the editor. I'd go in and make selects, you know, favorites, rejections. I would put notes. A lot of the work that we were doing at the software company I worked at was like documentary content, right? And it'd be like, you know, 3 hours of interview with like a archaeologist in Israel or some shit. And so it'd be like, whew, heady shit. So I'd be leaving like tons of notes. Then from there, I moved my way up to be an editor. So I was getting kind of the cool projects here and there. Then eventually lead editor there. In between, I also did about 8 or 9 months of being like a motion VFX assistant artist, I would say. Like, I was never like the go-to guy by any means. But that was something that I wanted to learn. I never wanted to be a motion person full time. I just wanted to understand it and be able to incorporate it at a basic level, but also knowing that down the road, I would hopefully eventually lead a team where I would be communicating with motion artists. So I wanted to understand it. Let's see, what else? I've held the role of photographer, of photo editor. I have held the role of audio engineer. I have held the role of, let's see here. I mean, like DP videographer. Dude, honestly, almost every single function other than designer and copywriter in the production world I've touched.
Very interesting. Do you think that says something about your success and your kind of knowledge base? Is you've touched basically everything in that entire process?
I think it says I have undiagnosed ADHD. No, I'm kidding. I think it says a lot of things. I have always kind of gravitated towards a cartoon character by the name of Curious George. And I think that I have always been kind of Curious Caleb. So I have pursued things that I find interesting. And so, you're on set and you see another role. It's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I'd love to know how that works. And I think if you were to talk to any mentor I've had, probably the number one piece of feedback they'd say of why they liked meeting with me, talking with me is because, like, when we told Caleb shit, he did it. Like, I actually take action on advice. And I feel like this is some of the advice that I got remotely in the content from Gary, right? And so I think I took extreme action on that.
Okay. I want to talk about exits now. So you've left probably two of the biggest entrepreneurs in kind of the online space. Talking about the kind of most recent one, what made you, or yeah, why did you make that decision?
Yeah, this is a very common question. And I think it's something that a lot of anybody that's listening or watching this that's on a team in-house that's kind of behind the scenes, they're going to laugh. They will resonate with this internal debate. The debate for a lot of characters behind the scenes is like, when? I don't want to jump too early. I don't want to leave and then some big thing that's way bigger than anything I got to work on happens right afterwards and I'm not a part of it. But the other thing is you don't want to stay too long, right? Like, you don't want to, if maybe opportunities are changing or there's not as much cool shit happening, you're not being challenged, whatever, you don't want to stick around either. So that's kind of the debate that I've had probably for the last 8 years in different roles, right? And the debate not being leave to the next thing, but leave to start my own thing. And there was a season of time where I thought I would never want to do my own thing after I worked for Gary and saw up close and personal what it's like building your own thing. And then I realized it was like, well, I'm not trying to build a $500 million a year agency. Like, I don't need to do it the way he does. I can be a little bit more normal, less like insane levels of activity like him. And so I think that debate's been going on for a while. In the last 3 years, I have had a lot of crazy inbound. I did a podcast about 3 years ago with a awesome dude named Jeremy Mary, Backstage Careers. And I hope this comes across correctly. I said yes to doing the podcast because at the time I think his channel had like less than 1,000 subscribers or around that. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it because hopefully nobody will see this. And that podcast, for me, a character who nobody knows, blew up. Like, it got like 200,000 views. And I had an insane amount of crazy characters in my inbox asking. But I was focused and dedicated to what I was working on at the time. And so I was ignoring it all. But eventually it got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm ignoring too many things. I'm going to be an old man and look back and be like, what would have happened if you would have pursued with that dream brand that's literally sitting in your inbox being like, we want to work with you, and you're just ignoring it. And so I think another thing I've gotten from Gary is that you want to do your best to eliminate the possibilities of regret later on in life. And so you want to scratch itches as much as possible. So this was me kind of scratching an itch and seeing, do I have what it takes? Do I have the chops to do my own thing?
Might be a bit personal, but why did it take 3 years?
I think it took 3 years because I had big goals with where I had started and I hadn't seen them through yet. And so I think my name, ironically, means a lot of different things, but one of them is loyal like a dog. And that is something that if you were to talk to anybody I've worked for or any friends of mine, I think all of them would say Caleb's very loyal, possibly to a fault. And so I think when I make a commitment, I do my absolute best to see it through. And once I get to a point where I feel like I've met that commitment and hopefully built up a system to where like things can keep running and everything, then I feel like that's when it makes sense. So I don't think it was like I think the timing was perfect, to be honest with you. Like any earlier, and I may not have the foundation to catapult off of, or catapult might be a little self-aggrandizing, jump off of.
Okay. I just want to ask now, for those people that don't know, what did you kind of leave to do, and how has that evolved in kind of the 6 months that you've been running your own business?
Yeah. So I started my own consulting firm, and basically, there's a couple of characters that I've really wanted to work with, but there's been tons of people in the DMs that have been asking how they can work with me, if they can get a call here and there, like all these things. And I've always said no. And so I looked at it as my way of being able to service and help a lot of people that I have um, made the right decision in not doing up until this point. But I have felt bad. Like people would DM me and be like, hey, like, even if I can't work with you, is there a resource of yours somewhere where I can see what your opinions are? And it's like, nope, nothing. And so I think I just got to a point where I was like, I want to help more people than I currently am able to. And so that's why we're making the content we're making, is number one, to do that genuinely. If it was purely to get leads, I don't think putting out a 6 hour and 22-minute course on YouTube would be the right move, and so, but that is also the goal with it too. And so, yeah, I think it's wanting that. I also, Jordan, have always historically focused on the singular brand that I'm working for. And that brings an incredible level of focus. But what it does leave out is a lot of interesting learnings that you're able to extract across the board and then apply in other areas. And so that was something else that I was really interested in. And transparently, there's a couple of really big dogs that I have targeted that I really want to work with in the next 5 years. I'll give you a little innie, I guess, or whatever. Like after putting the course out, I already have met with 2 of them. It's crazy. So like
Our content, hey?
Yeah, it's wild, man. But yeah, we're doing that. We're working with a very select few on some consulting work. A lot of the clients that we work with, they want to build their team out correctly. Either they're starting from scratch and they want to do it right, or they've been doing this consistently, but they're just not getting the results they want. And they know it's mostly about the team and the people that they're surrounding themselves with. And so I come in to help them build out their team properly.
Okay. From what I kind of read from that and from our prior conversations, I think there's a multiple kind of tiers of what you're essentially offering now. So you've got the content you're giving out, pretty insane, like you said, 6 hour courses on YouTube for free. Then there's a town hall that you're kind of introducing soon, which will be kind of, I don't want to say mid-ticket, low-ticket kind of price point that most people in business can get access to. And then you have your kind of more enterprise offering.
Exactly. Nailed it, dude. And I'm talking less about like business model offerings and stuff because I'm in Q2. Like you're not the big thing that I want to be very careful of in making content. And I say it so dramatically because I think this is something that everyone else fucks up, is like, I don't want to talk about shit that I'm not an expert on. Or if I am going to talk about it, I'm going to give some fucking heavy disclaimers. I'm not an expert on offers or running a business. I haven't even done it for a year. So you like here, I'm not even going super in depth on my answer to this because it's like, I've changed my offers 3 times in the last 6 months, and I will probably change them again, because I'm learning and stuff. So I think a little nugget that can be taken away from this though is like, you got a lot of people online that do something for 3 months, say they're a fucking expert, and start like doing a course on it. Like that'd be like, if I were following the typical model, I'd already have a course for, $197 on how to create consulting offers. Like what? I don't fucking know. shit about that, right? Brand and content, I feel very comfortable speaking with authority on because I've been doing it for 16 years.
Okay. And to that point, what kind of stuff have you done for those, one-to-one type offerings with clients on the strategy, branding, and content side? What do you do with them?
Oh, the majority of them right now, what we're doing is we are recruiting and building out their team. And so what I do is I come in to reverse engineer what are their needs. The problem a lot of people make is they look at the top dogs and the teams they have, and they try to replicate those teams and those systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
They watch all these great creators on YouTube that release videos on how their content system. But that's bullshit. That doesn't matter because you're not them. And so the best piece of advice Gary gave me when I moved on was, if you go on to ever build something like Team Gary for anyone else, don't build what I built. Reverse engineer their needs, preferences, and skills and build the team around that to be complementary, right? Like if one of our clients, let's say, for example, and this is not the case, but let's say one of them loves to film and they film all their own content. Well, why would we need to hire a videographer off the get? The biggest constraint we're going to have is editing, right? And so that's what we're going to want to hire. But maybe on previous teams, I've hired a videographer first. So we come in and we build a very extensive plan on that. And for some of them, I'm literally doing the hiring. So like I'm interviewing. That's like one of my favorite things. As a side note is I love the hiring process. It's so much fun. Even creating job descriptions, I love that shit. So that's a big one. Another big one is there's a couple of really big names in the business creator space that we're working with to help them because they've gotten to, I'd say they got to 80%, and they got to 80% by replicating a lot of the work that my previous team had done, right? And so what they will only be able to ever accomplish is being number two. And so what I'm doing is coming in and working with these creative directors, these brand directors, these team leads to help them establish what does it look like to have a culture where you innovate, you don't copy, right? How do we take you, this very like emerging hardcore in the business entrepreneur space online, how do we make sure that everyone's trying to copy your shit rather than you looking like a duplicate of anyone else? And so that's the two main camps that our clients fall into. And what's fun, Jordan, is like, I love both of those things so much. I would argue probably right now I'm in a season where I like the people side a little bit more, just because I love working with people and investing in people and finding the right characters. But yeah, those are the two areas. And so it's just fun. I get to it's less of the shit that I've not liked in the past and a whole hell of a lot more of what I absolutely love. And I think to use, I can't remember what terminology or what world this comes from, but like zone of genius, I think is the term that people use.
Yeah, for sure. I want to come back to the people bit in a minute, but just touching on the kind of strategy side there, you talked about kind of, if you're copying someone, you're always going to be number two, essentially. How are you, or what are you saying to people to get them to become number one? What advice do you have?
Stop watching who is currently number one. Stop duplicating everything that they're doing. So like a big one that everyone messes up is they use oneof10.com, which is right. If you're not using oneof10.com, you should be. It's absolutely incredible. It's a complete cheat code, at least as of Tuesday, April 29th at 9:53 a.m. Pacific time. It is a cheat code. But what they do is they look in their space. And this is what all the gurus are telling people to do too. And look, I get it. If you're teaching people how to go from never making a video to making a video, that's the right move, like for sure. But if we're talking somebody who is trying to be like in the top 10 of a space, top 5, why would you just take what somebody else is doing and like that will never put you there? So what I recommend people do is use these tools, borrow from others. By no means am I saying that you should just like be able to be like Nostradamus and predict every single time what's going to work on YouTube. No, but borrow from other industries, other niches. Look outside of your world at what's working, because I will tell you, because we created it, that's what the top dogs do. Because if they are the top dog, that means that there's nobody else that's making content that is higher or better than theirs in their space. So if they're looking for inspiration from somewhere, it's outside of that space. That's what everyone should do. So like look at video gamers, look at video essay channels, look at these like emerging comfort creators that I'm currently obsessed with. Like, look at all these other spaces. What are the formats that they're creating their content in, whether it be short form, carousel, YouTube long form, whatever. Look at what they're doing and use the first principle thinking. What is the version of this that I could do for my subject matter? And that's where you then start to emerge as like the winner in your space. Trust me, like it's very hard. I've made content for a lot of other people, but now we're going through the process of making it for me. And I want to accomplish this on a different scale. I don't ever have ambitions of being even a tenth as big as any of the people I've worked for. But I do want to pioneer some shit, right? And I want to create content that then other people start to iterate off of for their teams. But that's a little difficult to do in the beginning, right? And so that is kind of the process that we're taking on right now. And what that looks like, in my opinion, is having a really good stomach for shit flopping. So, for example, I mentioned earlier, we have a video that we filmed that is a massive experiment that we're releasing on Friday, May 2nd. And I have no fucking clue. I think it will probably not do well, but we're trying new shit, right? And if it does do well, who knows? Maybe this sticks and maybe other people start replicating this, But I think that the way you get there is not looking in your industry, look outside of your industry, and then be okay with looking like a failure for a little while, right? Like the first 2 videos that we put out, I thought they were going to flop, both of them. They've both done well, but like I did not think they would, and I was okay with that.
Okay, and just to be clear, like that is very useful advice, so thank you, Caleb. But just to be clear on what you're saying about kind of copying or taking the inspiration from people in other industries, you're saying copy the format, not the subject matter.
Correct. So like the title structure, like, blank advice in blank minutes didn't start in business.
No, got it. Makes sense. I want to now come back to something that you touched on before about being yourself. How important is that, and at what stage is that important in your kind of content journey?
I think it's just as important as being yourself in a relationship with your romantic partner. I think one day, if you are not yourself, eventually you will reveal, right? Like this happens in the early days of dating. We put on a front for the first 6 months, first year. What is it they say? I think it's like a year. You really know your partner like a year in or whatever. You can't keep up a front for a super long time. And it's the same with content. You just can't keep up a front. Now, I know there are people that literally their whole brand and their content game is like they have a character that isn't them. Like, okay, cool. If that is your intentional shtick, by all means. But the majority of us that are presenting differently than who we actually are, it's just because we're insecure about who we are. And I think we need to become more secure in that in order to be able to present ourselves. So I'm aware that there's a hurdle that needs to be jumped. But once you jump that hurdle, I believe that's the only way you're going to stick with it. I think eventually, you see this all the time, right? Like what YouTube came out in 2006. So we're like almost 20 years into it being a thing. But the real is like the real creators didn't really start popping until 2010, 11. So we're just now starting to see full life cycles of creators and people burning out because, like, one, either they presented from the get as somebody that they weren't, or two, more commonly, what I see with creators that do stick with it is we as humans evolve over time. But if you do not evolve in your content, then you are constantly, it's like going to your high school reunion every fucking week, right? It's like bringing you back to that old version of you. And so I think it's so funny you asked this. This is literally what the main point of the video coming out on Friday is like, I really think being uncomfortably you is it's the variable that's going to allow you to last the longest. I also think it's what's going to cause you to stand out the most. So like information, right? Like you told me kind of like 2 demos that, you kind of gravitate the podcast towards and stuff. And like info is fucking commoditized. Info does not matter, right? Because like fucking AI is going to ruin that shit, right? Like I'm getting to a point now where it's like I try to take all my recordings from calls, podcasts, things like that, put it into like my little model or whatever. It can recall stories better than I can on the spot. And so I think you being you is the only thing that will differentiate you. My knowledge on brand, right? Like that 6 hour, 22-minute course, that's a competitive moat for a very short window of time. And then I don't think it's that competitive anymore. And so I think you being you is the biggest thing, because that's what people are going to connect with, and they're going to want to learn. They're going to learn the same information, but they want to learn it from you, because the other people are robots. Not actual robots, although that will be a thing soon, but they're just being a robot in the content.
Okay. And when kind of creating content, should there always be an end goal? Like, should it always be about lead gen? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, what do you want to accomplish? Like I would say no, because there's too many variables. Like some people just want to, literally some people make content just to document things so that when they're older, they can look back and watch it. It's like a scrapbook, right? Like, so I would say I couldn't say yes to that statement, because I wouldn't be able to make it valid in every scenario.
Okay. I guess slightly kind of rephrasing that then is, if you were advising a business that was putting out content, would you say that every piece of content they do should be with that kind of North Star in mind?
Love that clarification. So this is what I would do. I would sit down and see what our timeline is. When do we need revenue? Do we need it right away? Right? Like, I think the best case scenario is you don't have to make the people that do this the best, that blow up the quickest, are the ones that don't have financial means and needs attached to the content in the first year. Now, most people have to, and I get that. But the best case scenario is like you don't. You don't have to maximize for leads. You're maximizing for value given. And value given is such an amorphous woo-woo term. Everyone says value, but they don't know what it just means. Things that can be applied. So the more content that you give in your first year that is applicable to your audience's life, that they can easily apply and get new results from without asking them for their money, the higher likelihood that you can ask them for their money forever.
Makes sense. I like that. What type of content should people kind of optimize for or make if they are trying to generate leads?
If you are in the educational space, then what you want to do is create content with the whole goal. Your singular North Star should be, how do I make it easier for them to do things differently after watching this? Everything should ladder up to that. That's all. Behavior change is the only thing that you want to have occur. Okay. And so that can be your North Star. Like, should we have a motion graphics like element in this moment? Well, will that make it easier for them to understand what you're saying and how to do it? Or will that distract them? So all decisions are made through that lens. That's what I would prefer to do. Okay. So I would share that, because what happens is eventually the audience starts to take action on what you share. They get good results and associate you with their success outcomes. As in, they go, every time I invest in what Jordan has to say, I get more out of it than what I invested. So now that he's making me aware of this offer that he has, I am inclined to believe that I'm going to get more out of it than what I'm going to pay for it or invest in it. So you want that. The other thing, though, is you want to share success stories, like customer testimonials, case studies, right? Like, case studies are the most important thing. The problem is everyone writes them off, because we come from a world, in the video production world, where you film a case study with somebody that lives on the 5th tab on your website that nobody ever consumes. But you can take case studies and you can modernize them and make them in a YouTube friendly format, in a LinkedIn friendly format, in an Instagram friendly format. Those are the two things that I believe you want to share. Ideally, together. Ideally, you're sharing case study, example of what you've done and result you got, and then how the audience can do the same thing, right? That is going to be the best content in my opinion. And when you know that your goal is to make it easy for people to change their behavior, well, then suddenly you realize maybe I don't need to give 10 different points in this video. Maybe I give 2 points and 10 different stories of how I did this in order to increase the odds that they actually take action. So it completely reframes the way you operate in making content. Now, if you're not in the education space and all of that, it's a little bit tougher and there's so much more nuance. But what I will say at a high level is you want to show the outcome that your product, your service, whatever provides. Okay. And what you want to do is basically, actually, let's get granular for a second. This is an exercise I tell a lot of people to do. If this is you, what you want to do is my 2-column exercise. On the left side, you're going to list out all of your competitors, the complaints that people have of your competitors. Okay. Now, you can go on Google, Yelp, all these different sites, Open Pilot or Trust Pilot, whatever the hell that thing is for the course people. You can look at what the complaints are, but I guarantee anybody who's listening or watching this that's in it, 10 things came to mind immediately. List all those 10 things out on the left side. Then literally all you're going to do is on the right side of that, the next column over, you're just going to take every single item in the left and write the exact opposite on the right. And then in every piece of content, every email, in your website copy, whatever, you're going to pick one of those items that's going to be your point of messaging. And what's going to happen is you're speaking to the pain that your potential customers are feeling from your competitors, and they're going to feel like you're fucking reading their mind because you are.
Okay, I love that. Just going back to what you said at the kind of start of that piece, something that kind of surprised me is you said in educational content, yes, have some information in it, but it's more about kind of the storytelling. Is that a correct read of what you said? And if so, why is storytelling so important?
Yes, because a lot of people, I promise this is related. A lot of people asked me over the last couple of years, like, why does Gary do so much mindset content and not as much of the like super tactical in the weeds? And I asked him this question, and I remember his answer was something to the effect of, well, I can give people all the tactics in the world, but if they're too insecure to hit publish on Instagram, none of those tactics matter. And so I think storytelling, allows people to hear a lesson, an action item, something to do in a scenario that maybe they can relate to or see themselves in. And it allows them to break the belief that they previously had associated with that thing, right? So, for example, this is going to be such a random example, paddleboarding. I'm a tall guy. And so I always give the excuse of, I don't paddleboard because, center of gravity and shit. I'm 6'7". But if all of a sudden I see somebody who is 7 foot paddleboarding, I don't really have that excuse anymore. And so I think that if you share these stories where the audience can see themselves in the story and see that this person was able to do the thing, overcome whatever, well, then they no longer have an excuse. So I think stories are very compelling in that way. And I think the other thing too, if we go back to the overarching goal of like getting them to change the behavior, if I tell, let's use a kid, for example, if I have a kid and I tell them to go do 10 things versus telling them to do one thing, the likelihood that nothing gets done with the 10 is high. The likelihood that the one thing that gets done, because there was only one thing shared, is higher, right? And so I think it also causes you to recognize, I don't need to share a shitload of information. I need a little bit of information and then more stories on how that information can be implemented. And so I think a lot of people overload their audience because they want to sound smart, but they're not actually serving their audience at the highest level.
Okay. And the correct way, again, just to kind of recap this and round it out, the best way to serve your audience and ultimately get leads and kind of grow is to simplify what you're doing, give people the confidence to take action, and then the rest will kind of follow.
Yeah. Make it easy for them to change what they do. If you make it easy for them to change, they're more likely to change. And if they change, they're more likely to get a good result. If you know what you're talking about and tell people the right things to do, then they will associate you and that result. And so then trust increases. And trust is the currency that precedes the transaction. That's what you have to do to build up the ability to then transact on your offer.
I love this. Moving on and talking about brand now. What does brand mean to you? Like, how would you kind of explain that in the content game? And is it important from day one?
Yeah, I think brand is an outcome. Sorry. So I think branding is a pairing of things. I think good branding is an intentional pairing of relevant things done consistently. And then when you do that consistently, that's when brand occurs. Brand is when the audience inherently associates those multiple things, two things, three things, whatever, right? And so an example that is so widely used and I will use it is Nike with Michael Jordan. By Michael Jordan showing up on the court and murdering it every night wearing Nikes, over time, the audience started to associate Nike with basketball greatness, not just running greatness, right? Because they had previously been a running shoe. And so that is ultimately how I view it. And so it then all of a sudden takes this like woo woo mysticism out of it and it just makes it very easy to operate off of. What do you want to be known for? What do you want to have happen? Right? In order for that to happen, what would you have to be known for? In order to be known for those things, what would you have to do? And then in order to do those things, what would you have to learn? That takes us to today. So I think brand is overcomplicated massively by a lot of people. Like here's another great example. Um, Brand is very simple and things are branded every day, right? If you move to, let's say you live in small town nowhere and you move to Chicago, okay? And you're in a big city, it's bustling, it's crazy, and you live in a tiny little apartment and you get really sick. In the first 6 months of living in Chicago, you're stuck in your apartment and you can't even go out, right? And you're just like suffering. Life sucks. Well, more than likely, a brand has been created on that apartment, right? You now associate your lack of loving life or whatever you want to call it with that apartment. So once you're healthy, you may still view that apartment in the same light. That's how I think of brand. And so, like, we brand people, we brand places, things, clothes all the time. People literally will wear a shirt because it's their lucky shirt. Well, all that is they have had good things happen when they wore the shirt. So they were intentionally paired, and then the outcome was the brand. Does that make sense?
100%. What would you say to someone that's maybe at the start of their content journey? What should they be thinking about when it comes to brand? And for example, is that like, wear a certain outfit or, yeah, what would you say to them about that?
I would ask them what they want to have happen. Now, there's plenty of people that if I ask that question, they'd be like, I have no idea. I just kind of want to do this and figure it out as I go. And that's a way to do it. Like, I'm not saying that's wrong, um, but if you go on a road trip with no end destination in mind and just kind of go, you're going to get somewhere, you don't know where. And, depending on the time of year, you may need to course correct because the weather is fucking gnarly or some shit. So I think of it very similarly. It's ideal to know what you want to have happen, but if you don't, just starting is the right move. What I would say is if you don't know what you want to have happen, the next step, if you're not there yet, is to figure out what do I not want to be known as and figure those things out. Because I think a big mistake a lot of people make early on is they know maybe what they want to be known for or where they're going, but what they don't think about is what they don't want to be associated with or known as. And so they take on opportunities, they film videos, talk about subject matter based on a lack of understanding of what brand is, right? I also think that sometimes people look at opportunities in the wrong way. And because they haven't clearly defined maybe what they want to be known for, what they want to have happen or not known for, they take on opportunities that look really sexy. A podcaster who has a massive audience, but happens to be shilling out a really shitty course that nobody finds value in and they charge for it or whatever. Is that like objectively wrong? I don't know. I'm not the morality police. But what I will say is if you in your early days appear with a lot of those characters, that is the light in which people will view you in, right? Just like in high school, when you show up to a new school, if you sit at the goth table, people aren't going to assume that you're a jock. Just because you sit at the goth table your freshman year doesn't mean that you can't be a jock your junior year. Okay. You can make the transition. So it's not like you're stuck. It is just harder to make that transition. So I want it to be clear, like anybody who feels like maybe like, oh shit, I've associated with a lot of fucking scammy characters. You can pivot and change. It will just be harder.
Nothing is permanent, right, in life.
Absolutely. Well, a few things are, but if you kill someone, that's pretty permanent. But
Going back to kind of what I was touching on, or what you were touching on before, kind of the second part of what you do, which is looking at team and building that out. Do you have a process for kind of going into an organization and kind of auditing what you see from a kind of people perspective?
the best case scenario, we aren't, just due to engagements, we aren't able to do this with every client. But the best case scenario is I get in on the process before we start hiring. I don't think that you should hire for any reason other than to solve a problem. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're bringing on a liability that you will eventually end up firing. And that sucks for everybody involved. Firing fucking sucks. It's my least favorite thing in the world. So we want to do everything to avoid that. And so, yeah, I want to see what are the gaps, what are the holes? Like sometimes, as funny as it'll sound, the only thing missing is like a project management process and a project manager. Maybe you have great editors, you have great videographers, you have great strategists, but nobody's communicating with each other and they don't understand what timelines are or anything like that. And you just need somebody to like keep them accountable and keep them moving down the line. Like really good creatives are going to probably want to make really good creative. And so sometimes what that means is they want to spend an extra day than they should on something. And sometimes you need somebody that can kind of, scoot them along kind of a thing. So it might be simple like that. The other thing that I've often found, this is actually probably the most common one, is our clients are working with somebody that they're filming with that creates a very bad filming environment where they don't feel comfortable on camera, where they don't look forward to film sessions. They actually see it on their calendar. They get anxiety and they're like, ugh, I want to avoid that at all costs. And so that's where my goal is to always do our best to work with the talent that is already there and train them up. That's goal number one. So what I do is I start working with the individual who is running those film sessions. I view this as like possibly the most important part of the whole process. This is the tip of the spear because unless you're like a Mr. Beast where you're creating for each platform and doing like crazy shit like that, for the highest percentage of like entrepreneurs creating content, they're making like one or two things that are getting redistributed. So that film session is the massive domino effect for everything else you're going to get. So if you don't conduct that well, you fuck everything else up. And so I'll work with that individual and train them on how I go about conducting film sessions. I'll run them through, I can't remember how many pages. I think it's like a 10-page playbook that we have on how to run film sessions. It might not be 10 pages. It might be like 5, but it's fucking in depth. And it's like so granular down to like when I walk into the studio, I make a joke immediately. So the talent knows this isn't that serious. Like find out what snacks, what soda, what beverage do they like? Do they like gum? Do they like, are they a Zyn person? Do they love Zyn? Right? Like have their things on set. All of these little things that we do that when you add them up, create something that all of a sudden talent, I can't tell you how many times they start saying, wait a second, this is weird. I'm like excited to film now. I'm looking forward to the film session, not dreading it.
Okay. You mentioned that the kind of first principle, the starting point with this is a good process for a business that is, let's say, kind of focused on video, long form video as the kind of root piece of content, and then they redistribute that across other channels. What does a good process look like for that?
Well, I would ask, does this individual like scripts? Do they like outlines or do they like interviews? Where are they most comfortable? I can tell you right now which of those 3 is going to perform the best 10 times out of 10 on YouTube. But if they don't like it, it doesn't matter.
Which one out of interest performs the best?
Yeah. Like which one do you, the person who's going to do this, like the most? Like, what do you feel most comfortable? Because if a direct to camera scripted video is going to be the most optimized version of this video, but you're going to be uncomfortable and fucking awkward as shit throughout it, not worth it, right? I'd rather do more of an interview Q&A based video that we can weave in. So that would be number one. Figure out what are they most comfortable? What are they going to show up the best in, right? Like maybe it's not sitting down in a studio. Maybe it's going out and doing a walk and talk, because maybe when they're sitting there with lights and cameras, they get in their head. But when they're out in nature or walking through the city, they're not even thinking about the fact that you're filming them. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is making sure that once we know what the format is, we understand, and this is going to sound basic, but a lot of people don't do this. Making sure we know what we're fucking filming. Okay, so like have the topic generated, know what the title and thumbnail are before you film it. Okay, so come up with the packaging and what the concept is. Mr. Beast, I mean, we've heard it ad nauseum now. You win in the idea. So make sure you have the idea dialed. Then, based on what they said they prefer, build out the prompt. Again, if they're going with like line by line script, okay, cool. It's a full on script. Sometimes people prefer outlines. Or maybe if they want the Q&A, it's just a list of your questions with the answers that you want them to give so that you can guide them to that, right? And you can take them through essentially a direct camera video without them realizing it. The next thing that you're going to want to do is, and again, this sounds basic, but a lot of people miss this. If you have a team who is creating this pre-production and putting the brief together, meet with the talent beforehand to get approval and make sure they like the video. I can't tell you how many times I have heard about different scenarios where a team that we're working with, historically, their whole process is like they show up day of and the talent's like, okay, we can film this, but we're going to have to edit it for like an hour before we start filming because I don't like this, this, and this. And guess what that does? That builds momentum in the wrong direction. Momentum is powerful in both ways, good momentum and bad momentum. That is a very bad momentous start. Okay. And so then what you have is you're having to overcome so many different things, because whether the talent is saying it or not, in the back of their head, they're like, why the fuck are we doing this? How did we not get this approved ahead of time? Why am I wasting my time on this? And they're thinking about that while they're filming. It's not going to be a good video. So do that. Once all these things are done, then what you're going to do is you're going to set up the environment. Again, you want to make sure that it's conducive to them. So based on what kind of format they said they like, build the best version of that. If you are doing a line by line script, it should not be notes off to the left of the camera. You should have a teleprompter. Okay. Unless they have explicitly said, I can't read off a teleprompter. I'll read a line, say it, read a line. Cool. But you should have a teleprompter. If it's more of an outline and it's bulleted, it shouldn't be a teleprompter. What you should do is have a 50 to 55 inch TV off to the left or right of a cam that is massive, that has the Google Doc, the bulleted outline of it, that the team can scroll through so they can reference off camera. If it's Q&A and they don't like having the questions ahead of time, like me and this, well, then you have your list of questions and you just rip off the dome, okay? And then literally make sure that they have their preferred beverages. As the fucking crew on there, watch for, like right now, my mouth is getting a little dry, right? So I'm going to take a fucking drink. If I didn't have a drink, I fucking promise you, Trevor over here would grab a water and bring it to me. Like, make sure you're noticing these little things. They add up. Every time they say something that's really good after a take, go up and give them a high five or a fist pound. When you're behind the camera and they're talking and they're saying good shit, just like you just did right there, Jordan, nod your head so they know what they're saying is actually interesting, right? These are all little tiny things, but when you add them up, like, here's the reality. I've been doing this behind the scenes for 16 years. I'm now the person in front of the camera, and Trevor does these things. And it's fucking helpful as shit. I had no idea how valuable it was until now I'm on the receiving end. It's a complete game changer. So I would do that. And then, I mean, we can keep going. While you're filming, having somebody on set taking notes of one, things that maybe something that was said that, you know, we all in creating content, we say something that we're like, we should cut that. So taking note of anything that should be cut, taking note of anything that wasn't clear in how the talent said it, and taking note of your follow-up question and saving it for the end. Uh, and then taking note of any other things like, this would be a great short, whatever. And then what you're going to do is once you finish filming what the talent was planning on filming, you go into follow-ups. I think of content very similarly to a very good VSL. A really good VSL overcomes objections with the prospect before they ever hop on a call. I think really good content overcomes objections before the audience ever hits the comment section. And so what you want is you want your team looking at it through the eyes of the troll, the skeptic, the people on YouTube that are going to give you all the excuses or reasons why this won't work for them. Ask the talent those questions. Make sure to note where, in the script that should be injected in the edit. And then you're going to go into ingesting. And then, that's the whole post-production. But that's how I would go about it.
Okay. That's very insightful. What, in terms of the team to get that done, what would you say are the kind of key spots, and how do you prioritize those kind of hires in an organization?
So the best case scenario is if you're like a bigger team, I'll divide this up. If you're a bigger team and you're omni-channel, so you're on all the platforms and all that shit, the best case scenario is you're going to have somebody who is managing your long form content platform. So like a YouTube manager, YouTube director, whatever title you want to give them. I would have that. So you're going to want a character like that. This is ideally somebody who is going to be deep in the analytics and strategy side of things. They're going to be really good with ideation. And those are the cores that you need there. Anything else is nice to have, but those are the main, I guess, skills that I'm looking for in that role. And then below that, based on your output is how you determine it. So like if you're putting out one video a month, you might only need one video editor. If you're putting out one video a week, you might need 2 or 3. If you're putting out multiple videos, depending on the complexity of the edit, you might need like a team of 5 to 10 editors. I've seen that many times. And so I think for me, when I'm giving more blanket advice, I speak more to how to look for the leader. And then the leader needs to be the one that reverse engineers the individual needs of like, okay, we're putting out 14 YouTube videos a week. We need like 20 fucking editors or whatever, right? And so I think that's where there's more nuance that I get scared to speak to too heavily because I've seen people take it very literally, but not think through like their situation. And so I try to be careful about that.
Okay. And in terms of kind of repurposing across to other channels, how do you think about that process and team for that as well?
I think repurposing is the best way to enter into the game of posting on all the platforms. I think if you are trying to compete in that top 1%, top 5%, you will lose. It's just like, think about it this way. I use this analogy, but I'll share it in a slightly different way than I've ever done it. Jordan, if you were to go, I'm going to use a dark analogy here. So I hope we can go with this here. You show up to a funeral for someone that you were really close to. Okay. And then you have 3 more things coming up: drinks with the boys, a massive business meeting with your dream clients, and then lunch with your mom. If you show up the same way you did to that funeral, to all of those other events, that might be kind of weird, right? And it might not click with people in those scenarios, okay? That's what redistributing content is. It's being one way and showing up to every scenario, every event, that exact same way. But the platforms are just like all these different events. They all require different context, different lingo, right? Different inside jokes, all these different little nuance elements that you're still Jordan showing up to all these different environments. But I guarantee when you're going out and getting drinks with the boys versus getting lunch with your mom, I shouldn't say guarantee, but probably you're talking a little bit differently, talking about different things, using different words, right? Like maybe even your tone is different, right? You might be willing to have a few extra beers with the boys versus with your mom. You might stick to like 1 beer or just tea or whatever, right? And so that's where I think the best case scenario of this is you're making content that is contextual to the platform. you know the lingo is different on LinkedIn versus TikTok. And so you're still showing up as you, you're not faking it. You're just presenting a different side of you that is more conducive for that platform.
Okay. And can you do that with the same piece of content, or do you essentially, in an ideal world, need to create separate content for each platform?
That's a great question. So phase one is redistributing content from one pillar piece. Phase two is redistributing content, like re-editing the same pillar media differently for the platform. So you're correct. That's phase two, which is like maybe it's the same clip for Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn, but maybe we did different hooks for all three. Okay. That's phase two. Phase three is here's the core concept that I want to share. How do we share this core concept in a LinkedIn environment, in a TikTok environment, Instagram, YouTube, etc.? And that's where it starts getting really, really fucking crazy. But as you can imagine, that requires a lot of resources, time, team, all of that.
Okay, amazing. I know we're close on time, so just to kind of, before we round things off, my final question is, I know you built out a pretty insane team at acquisition. Can you just talk to what made it so special?
The people. Every single person that I hired on that team, I fucking love to death. And not in like this like weird cringe fucking we're family, shit. No, I just like genuinely cared about them. And I think that like there was this level of like something that I observed a lot was this like selfless desire to jump in and help somebody else if they were struggling on something. It was like there was, I mean, we're all human. So there was obviously unhealthy competition that would occur too, because that's just how things go. But I would say compared to most teams I've seen, there was such a level of competition of like us versus them, like outside, not all the creators versus each other. And so the amount of times that I would see an editor who had something due the next day and they maybe had 30% more to go, and them spending an hour with one of these other editors helping them solve a problem meant that they were going to be up until like fucking 1 or 2 in the morning. And I saw that shit happen over and over and over. So I think there's that. I think another thing that I tried to do, and would never say that I did it perfectly by any means, but I tried to prioritize hiring around culture fit over skill fit. Skill fit is very important, but I believe it is a lot easier to train skills than it is like hard skills, I should say, versus soft skills, right? And the reason why is because I think hard skills are having less outside input outside of the work environment. Whereas the soft skills, well, once they leave the office, they're also going out and interacting with their family, friends, etc. All these other people that are potentially reinforcing bad behaviors, for example. That's going to be a hard one to overcome. And so I really tried to focus on that, is looking for people that were hungry, humble, really willing to work their face off, and were willing to help each other. I also think, dude, I try to find people that I feel I can pour the most into. And you would think in me saying that would mean that it was just like a team of a bunch of mini me's, but actually it couldn't be further from the truth. The majority of the team was like very different than me, as far as like personal interest, personality, all of those things, right? But I think what I look for is like, what is my competitive advantage as their leader? What is it that like I as their leader can impart to them that maybe they wouldn't be able to get elsewhere, or would be harder, or whatever, right? And not in like a weird way, but like in a way that, I mean, the thing that I would ask anybody on the team is, what do you want to have happen in your career? Where are you wanting to go? Because it's my goal that whether you're here for a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever, that your time here moves you closer to that desired outcome than any other job you could have had. And so I think there's a certain level of, if you show that you care for your team in that way, they will show you respect and loyalty in a way that I never could have imagined. So if I had to ask for a last minute revision Friday night at 11 p.m., the team knew I wasn't, I didn't just ask that without knowing what that meant, right? Or without me being willing to do it myself, right? And actually get into the timeline and do it myself. And so, yeah, I know I'm kind of rambling a little bit because honestly, when you asked the question, I got a little emotional because I love them. And the other cool thing is like I'm in contact with all of them still, and I talk to them. Not everybody at the same cadence by any means, but I'm constantly trying to check in on them, see if there's anything. They've moved. A lot of them have moved on to other different roles and stuff, and are doing amazing things. How can I serve you? How can I help you? What can I do? Can I make an intro? Is there, a lot of them leveled up in a lot of other areas, and now they're running teams or they're in more of a leadership role, but it's new for them. So it's like, hey, I ran over a couple of potholes that I could maybe point out so you could avoid, kind of a thing. I hope that gave you a good answer. I apologize for kind of verbally processing there, I guess.
No, I love that. I think it's a very rare answer to that kind of question. And I think it says a lot to your kind of mindset, how much you care. So thank you.
That's cool.
Caleb, I could continue this conversation for hours, but yeah, I'll let you go there. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. For people that want to kind of find out more and follow your journey, where should they go?
Well, first off, thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it. Means a lot that you took interest in the things that I think about or have to say. So that means a lot. Thank you. Yeah, if anyone wants to find me, you can just search my name, Caleb Ralston. It'll hopefully pop up on YouTube. I would say right now I'm active on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. The other platforms, not as much. We'll bring those up, but those are more the areas that we're focusing on right now. And the real favor that I would ask is shoot me a DM on Instagram. I love talking to people and going back and forth as much as I can. I try my very best to respond to every single one. I definitely don't get to every single one, but I really, really try. Same with comments. So yeah, if anyone wants to chat, let's chat it up.
Very cool. Appreciate it. Caleb,
Happy to introduce you.
Thank you so much for coming on. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it, man. This was awesome.
Scaling an e-com brand is hard. That's why we're on a mission to share as much info as we can to help make it easy. From weekly interviews with the biggest names in the space, to case studies, brand breakdowns, and tips and tricks, and much, much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out.